the Game Philosopher, and today we're going to be talking about death because coronavirus and all has put it on people's minds. And today I would like to present a loose compilation of teachings from ancient philosophers. I'm not going to talk about them in particular, but rather their ideas. Like, for example, Cicero, Seneca, Epicurus. I might even throw in a little bit of Boetius. We'll see how that works. But how or why do we fear death? We fear death because of all sorts of things. We might want to be there for our family. We might fear that we don't know what's going to happen after death, which is, of course, a realistic thing. I mean, like, a lot of people don't know what's going to happen, and so they fear death because they don't know if we're going to go to some afterlife or some non-existence. And a lot of people fear death because they like living, which would be a preference towards living. And I think that preference, a lot of these reasons can actually be rational and actually be used to combat the fear of death. In fact, I think, for example, the one on ignorance. Well, if there are these two possibility options. One is that there's an afterlife. One is that there's nothing. If there is nothing, there's nothing to fear. Because if there is nothing, essentially, you don't feel it. You don't know it. And it's all fine. Now, if there is something, if there's an afterlife, you are going essentially to a better place. Now, people go about, what about hell? Well, yeah, what about hell? I mean, like, you still have consciousness, don't you? If it's the afterlife. But that itself can be something to be joyful for, but let's remove the option of if there's hell or not, because I would rather this be a philosophy type talk than a theology. So yeah, you have this afterlife, or you have nothing. Both of these options are actually much better than actually what we have now, which is living. But that said, you shouldn't be wanting to push yourself towards death because a lot of times when we're depressed, we don't realize that life does get better. And I've done a video on depression. If you're feeling suicidal or whatever, don't look at this video. Look at that video, which I've done like months ago. It's such a wonderful video, which I pour out my heart to people and say that you shouldn't kill yourself. You should love life and enjoy things. But as for everyone else, talking about the fear of death, like I said, loving death actually is much more preferable to fearing death, because when you fear death, what's the point? What are you doing if you're fearing death other than limiting your options in life? What are you doing if you're fearing death instead of living well in life? In fact, as Epictetus said, this very beautiful passage in his discourses, actually it's early in the book, he goes over this situation where this guy tells him, shave off his beard or he will imprison him, shave off his beard or he will torture him, shave off his beard or he will cut off his head. And in this situation, Epictetus says, no, 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 and gives a little witty response to each nose. And then he takes a good statement to follow up with the teaching that I must die, but must I die bawling? I must die, in other words. But why should I cry about the fact that I should die? I should die, but I need pretty much to die with honor. It's in fact attached to the Stoic idea of liberty, um, that one should be indifferent to things outside of their control, which is also a Cynic idea of liberty. Um, that taking oneself out of the fear of death is itself a very liberating concept. In fact, when we're talking about the liberating concept of the fear of death being done away with without any concern for things outside of our control, we're also talking about how can someone live essentially if they're constantly under these threats. And yet we also have beautiful examples both from the Stoics and the Epicureans where people would live simply. They would have self-sufficiency as their principle. In fact, there's an ancient dispute between the Stoics and Epicureans, but the truth is they're not too far different. In fact, they're both very materialistic, for one. You could say a lot of superficial differences, like the Stoics were more into virtue, the Epicureans were more into pleasure and happiness. Now, the thing is, when you get into the roots, how Epicurus defines pleasure is actually not quite different from how the Stoics define happiness, even the Platonists, because eudaimonia is the key in both philosophies. That happiness, the eudaimonia, which comes from doing good things and living simply and all, ultimately is established through the same means, and they are often more outstanding in all. In fact, Epicurus, and I'm going to get rid of some of the myths about Epicurus, he actually is not so much into sexual pleasure or extravagant eating. He's actually more into enjoying life with friends, simple conversations, love, friendship, and all this other stuff. And analyzing your life. In fact, even on the back of this book, he says, nothing is sufficient for the person who finds sufficiency in too little. And as we're going through times of plague, of pandemic, we are essentially isolated. It's really hard to get to the store sometimes. In fact, some governments actually limit your store time, as luckily not that way in America. So essentially, you're going to want to have lots of things, a lot of simple things that will last for a while until the pandemic is over or the government lightens things up. And you're not going to care about your taste so much. Of course, you might, but you're just going to get stuff because you have to eat. You have to take care of your health. You have to do all these things. But the sufficiency itself, the self-sufficiency, is there when you establish this. You have so much sufficiency and so little that you can actually live pretty happily despite all the times of isolation and loneliness, of sickness, and even the death of your loved ones. I mean, like, there's even a lot of good philosophical aspects to that. Like, even Epicurus says that we should not mourn the deaths of our loved ones, which, of course, that's going to cause a lot of controversy. Please dispute it down there. I don't really want to deny my fans of this ability to criticize anything that's being said, but you don't mourn them. You think about them. You celebrate, essentially, their lives. And that's what a lot of times funerals are all about. Now, of course, there's no funerals and pandemics because the government does not want people to die, or not die, but get infected so that they will eventually die, or possibly die. because they want to cut down on the stuff, but essentially, if you follow through all this, it goes to what Marcus Aurelius once said: live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without hypocrisy, without pretension. And in other words, live each day as if it were your last. When you do this, you will not at all find anything else but the need to love and be with your loved ones, to give to people who are in need, to uh, think through things, to analyze things, to learn as much as you can, to enjoy the last days of your life. The last, well, if it was your last day, you would, and you knew it was your last day, you would cherish every hour, every minute, every second. You would not push anything back. You would actually do everything you can. No procrastination. And of course, people who watch my show are either philosophy nerds or gamers. But we all like to procrastinate. That's how our demographic does things. Take care of your health. Find these simple joys and pleasures so that you don't get depressed or sick, or not sick, but depressed or anxious or whatever in these times. You just read. You contemplate things. You talk with people. Of course, social distancing as well. But you do what you can to survive. There's no need to fear these deaths. There's no death will happen, and when death happens, there will be a change. But this change, in my opinion, is a good change because on my side of things, I believe that there's an afterlife, and since there's an afterlife, there's nothing to fear about death because it's just a change from one state to another. Now, if you believed that there is no afterlife, it's still the same change, one state to another. You will not, instead of having an afterlife, you will not feel anything because there would be nothing. Either way, death is not to be feared. Death is to be accepted, and in some cases, actually loved. But if we think about death all the time, if we ponder about death in such a way that's negative towards our health, negative and makes us die 1,000 times before we actually die, makes us such a way that we're not living freely or living well, then what's the point? There is no point. Thanks for watching.